Hi everyone, welcome back to another video, the Superman trailer. We start with learning a lot about Lois and Clark and where they are in this film. They've been dating for a few months, she knows his identity, so they're just skipping over all the obvious things that you expect from a Superman film and giving us, like, in the middle of the story, that's where we're picking up. And I kind of enjoy that because Lois Lane is not stupid, she's an investigative journalist. So you can easily we don't need to see her understanding how Clark is Superman. You can easily understand how she would figure it out. It makes everyone else in the building look stupid because they're a bunch of investigative journalists, but there is a certain amount of um, suspending one's disbelief one has to do when watching a superhero film. So anyway, and then we open the trailer on a really interesting point of she agrees to interview Clark as Superman, and we get sort of a similar thing to Superman versus the Elite, where he's helping in an international incident, fighting a kaiju, and helping stop a war between governments, which is what happened as part of the plot of Superman versus the Elite, which is why there's a lot of people saying this film will have similar plot beats. I've heard different, and I will talk about that here, so possible spoilers for rumours coming in this video. Which will lead into a second video I'm going to make on what the hell's going on with DC in general at the moment, but let's stick to the trailer as that's come out today. So, the trailer starts with what I think is a really interesting thing of seeing Lois actually interview Superman and basically play the human strong arm angle, and she's an investigative journalist, so it makes sense as to why she's doing this, because she wants to not let on that she's as connected to Clark as she is, and she doesn't know who Superman is. Governments of the world are obviously seeing this as Superman acting unilaterally and ignoring routine sovereign borders. We've had many plots of this in recent years, such as Batman v Superman, this was debated on, or Civil War from the Marvel side. And people are angry about this online because people are saying, well, surely Clark would know that that's what Lois was going to be like. And some people are saying that Lois should go easier on him because it's Superman. And I think that's just both sides of the Snyder Cut argument, to be honest. Trying to shit on James Gunn's Superman before we've even really seen it. And you can go away. Because I'm at least going to see the film before I judge it. And it's based on Superman versus the Elite in some plot beats. And I love that film. And I love that film in that comic. So I am obviously going to watch it. But anyway, I will watch and judge. And I recommend you guys do the same. But when they say, oh, why is Lois doing this, it's actually quite understandable with the modern day political climate that there would be a lot of government oversight and interference, and there would be a lot of polarizing public basically being a bit confused and being a bit like, this guy's an alien that could kill us all. And, you know, very much every government is like, we have to tolerate superheroes because we can't necessarily completely stop them, and we can't stop monoliths like Superman because they're a god to him even if he doesn't act like one, sort of thing. But that doesn't mean they have to like it. So obviously governments are going to have this debate amongst his sort of proper debut. I assume this isn't like an origin film, but he hasn't been around for very long. So these kind of debates happening in government and these kind of debates happening in news media, and Lois having to tackle these conversations with Clark as Superman whilst interviewing him makes complete and total sense, especially when you consider that it's being written by James Gunn and modern politics is going to show up in these films because it's James Gunn. And most directors put modern politics in. So with the politics of the political climate of today, are you surprised that Lois is grilling him? Even if she doesn't agree with it, from a journalistic point of view, she's still got to cover the topic because that's what everyone's going to be talking about. So I don't blame Lois here, but I also don't blame Clark for getting angry with her, because Clark is wishing that humans, especially Lois, who is his connection to humanity, could see the world as he does. Think about the plotline of All-Star Superman, for example, when Lex manages to sympathise Superman's powers for 24 hours and eventually calms down, and Superman has a wonderful conversation with him about, really look through my lens of how I see every molecule of the world, and look how I see everything connected. So scientists try to understand string theory, people's place in the world and philosophy, but Superman can see it through the way his powers allow him to see, how far they allow him to see, and how microscopically, emotionally, and philosophically he connects things because of his powers. And he's having that wonderful conversation with Lex Luthor about that very thing. and Lex actually has a couple of profound moments and a couple of realizations, and that conversation is brilliantly done. Watch the All-Star Superman animated film before this comes out if you don't know what conversation I'm talking about, but I can't do it justice, so I'm going to move on from that. But that's why Clark is getting angry here, because quite frankly, he wants Lois to understand how he sees, connects everything morally, philosophically, emotionally, and because of his powers. But she just doesn't. Humans just don't. We wouldn't be able to, unless we're seeing the lens from Clark's perspective in the film like we are here. It's, it's quite profound from Clark's point of view, so it makes sense that they're getting angry at each other. I do hope this doesn't lead into a massive relationship drama, but I do think seeing more of this scene will be really interesting. Then we see a guy in a suit which could be like an earlier version of Lex's technological suit that he used to take on Superman in many iterations of comics, attacking Superman, I believe, in the middle of the war-torn area. And that, to me, screams Ultraman. If you don't know what Ultraman is, it's been rumoured for a while. Ultraman is essentially a clone of Superman that would have his powers, but that Lex makes, so Lex manipulates. And I think it would be interesting to see Ultraman in this film, and it definitely looks like that's where they're going, either Ultraman or Bizarro in that suit, or both. We could have multiple clones in this film, and I think that's supported by the fact that you see the fortress getting attacked by Lex's men and people, and you can only enter the fortress usually if you have Kryptonian DNA, so I think there's more than one Superman clone in this film, and the Superman clone are the enemies we're going to see here. But that suit, I think, is to basically confuse Superman into not knowing who he's fighting, so that he doesn't yet catch on to Lex's schemes, and then you see a couple of shots of the full fight later on when Superman is in the football stadium, where he also saves the girl if you connect trailer shots, I believe. So that, I think, is from the final fight, where obviously it will be revealed to be a clone of him. The world will probably see that and have some big philosophical debate, but then Superman will save them from the clone, and they'll realise that the true message of Superman is peace, justice, the American way, and a better tomorrow, whichever slogan they go with. I personally think they should go with the American way, because it's the classic slogan, and quite frankly, a better tomorrow, it's a good slogan, but it was only changed because of political climates of the day. And if we're going to keep with Superman's normal moralistic storyline, and does his normal moral compass work? Is this something he wants? Again, similarly to similarly explored in Superman versus the Elite. If we're going to keep to does Superman's morals work in 2025, and him having that big philosophical debate with even Lois having an interview and quite a strong opinion against him, or at least a temporary opinion against him, whether that's coming from journalistic integrity or as a scared human observing her boyfriend being Superman. Because, she must have opinions about it, and she had opinions in Superman versus the Elite, and she may have opinions here, whether it's just journalistic ones or personal. But if we're going to keep exploring that theme, that message, that way in, which it seems that's the lens we're exploring from a thematic and theatrical point of view here, then it makes perfect sense to keep the original slogan of truth, justice, and the American way. Plus, it sounds better in my opinion. But what are your opinions on that? Let me know in the comments. It also makes perfect sense that we would see him fighting a clone of Superman and multiple clones of himself, and the world debating all of that kind of stuff, but also see him saving people whilst in a big final fight, because Superman is kind of reckless with his powers in some iterations, or it's going to seem reckless to humans observing the carnage. So overall, it's going to be really interesting to see all of this unfold, and the trailer shots we got here, I think, link up really, really well. You see a little bit of the human, humble beginnings of Superman when you have Jonathan Kent, couldn't think of the name then, Jonathan Kent's voice do a bit of a voiceover, and you see him on a massive house that is basically just a massively beaten down house, which is basically just a massive beaten down double trailer, and that's actually his farmhouse. That was taken from James Gunn's own upbringing, or things he saw when he was growing up, and that's an interesting thing, and I think it could work really well, because it shows that Clark has come from humble beginnings, poor beginnings, but seeing the gratitude, the kindness of life through the Kents. And that's just lovely. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. I'd rather see the Elite rather than just a bunch of Superman clones. Because I think the Elite could be cool as well. And if we're going to talk about Superman's moral system, they were a good crutch against that in the animated film, as I previously talked about. Even I think my first video, or one of my first videos on this channel. Scroll back through, it'll be there. It's quite a fun video, I think. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing clones of Superman. We're seeing potentially Ultraman, or Bizarro, or both, or a legion of clones of Superman. And it's going to be interesting because the trailer really gives you a lot of interesting, cool shots to talk about, which I've only covered in brief detail here because I think other people are going to be able to cover it much better than me in terms of Easter eggs and things. But have I enjoyed this trailer? Do I enjoy the position we're seeing Clark, Lois, and all the general point of views of the political side of things? Yes, I enjoyed the trailer, and it doesn't look like we're getting... And I'm going to comment on one other thing as well. I enjoyed the trailer very much. This trailer really drew me in. I think the marketing for the film has been a bit dire, though, because it's not long till it's coming out. And I'm like, I think they should market it and hype it up a bit more. But it's James Gunn doing a Superman film I'm going to watch, and every trailer I've seen has made me think that James really does understand the character. When you think back to the first trailer when we see Krypto, which was his human lens in, he likes putting animals in films, and Superman beaten on his arse, it shows that though he may be near invincible, he's not invincible, and he does indeed have a human side and can be beaten, and we're going to see a lot of that in this film. That's what that showed to me, and that a character isn't too powerful just because he has powers. You just have to do power scaling appropriately, and it looks like James can do that, along with a lot of interesting connecting shots that make you want to theorize about what points in the film they're going to be in. But it looks like this film is going to be a heavily political film on, does Superman's powers and his hope, justice, and the American way sort of outlook, does that fit in modern morals of 2025? How did the public respond to them? I think it's good and it's interesting because realistically, public are going to respond to superheroes when they're first emerging, or when there's a new one on the scene alongside others. You know, they are going to respond to them in a way that they would fight back. I don't think any human species, any aberration in the human species, like when think about the transition between Neanderthals and humans will fight back. We're warring creatures, as being shown by the terrible political climate of today across the world. So it makes sense that when they're talking about war... Sorry, this is really depressing. It makes sense that when they're talking about war in a Superman film, you're going to see that kind of moral juxtaposition between Superman, humans, and even humans he's connected to, like Lois. But this trailer was great. I liked every shot in this trailer. It's really interested me and really makes me think that I want to dive deep into James Gunn's what is essentially a political and character study on Superman. And I trust James Gunn to handle the politics in a less preachy way than some other films, or at least more interesting and more nuanced with more depth. Because that's the problem. Politics in films is always going to be there. Politics behind the scenes of films is always going to be there. But the point of handling it with depth and nuance has just gone out the window in recent years. But James Gunn has felt the sharp end of political stings in his career, as we know, and he also seems to be writing the trailer shots with visual nuance, so I trust that he will do this well, and I'm excited for this. What do you guys think about the Superman trailer? Comment below and let me know. Before I let you go, I'm going to talk about what I expect to see from this trailer and what parts of it I think might be lying to us. The truth of the things are, I think, the final fight shots in the stadium with the Metropolis meteors, which I think is a cool reference to the fact that Smallville isn't very far away from Metropolis, so some of the meteors probably landed or could be viewed from Metropolis, hence why they've named the team that, because the meteors, the crash landing of Clark, and the destruction of his planet, it works, kind of thing. It really does work, and it's a cool little Easter egg. Anyway, the football stadium fight, which I presume will be with Ultraman and other Lex Luthor clones, or perhaps Lex Luthor in a suit and Ultraman, will be interesting to view and interesting to witness. And I think that's the trustworthy part of the trailer. The non-trustworthy part of the trailer is all the war-torn stuff that may have been coming directly out of Superman vs. the Elite with a few tweaks, because the Elite aren't in this film, as far as we can tell. But the reason I don't think that's trustworthy or realistic is because of political climates of the time and the amount of wars. I don't really want to talk about this too much on YouTube, but yeah, political climates. Because of that, there may be things that were cut. Apparently, even Piers Morgan was going to have some sort of news cameo commenting on Superman from a derogatory sort of way, but because of real life events, Piers Morgan was not actually invited. It was a discussed idea that he might be in the film along with other controversial news pundits, but that's not happening now because of real life events. And if they backed off of having a news pundit that people don't like very much in a film, and I don't really like him much either. But anyway, if they backed off on having a news pundit people don't like having in a film because he's a bit of a blowhard, then I think that a lot of the war-torn stuff, like the kid raising the Superman flag that's been made and he's waving and hoping Superman can see it, I think that's going to get cut. You might have the public helping him up whilst he's in the middle of a fight or cheering for him towards the end of a fight, but I think a lot of the political Middle Eastern stuff, there's a bioweapons program in Superman vs. the Elite that brings in the international incidents, and some of the war-torn stuff, maybe even the stopping a war thing will only be talked about and be in news pundits, but we won't actually see it, because I think that Warner Brothers is being very careful with the measurement of politics, with the theatrical climate, and the way politics is just not being written with nuance. Like, whatever side of the line you're on, I'm not judging here, but whatever side of the line you're on, there is no nuance in politics because people just wearing politics on their sleeve now, and you can put politics in films, but write it better, write it interestingly, for God's sake. I mean, if you want a take on what I'm getting at here, then look at Doctor Who of recent times. Ross T. Davis is clearly a checked-out writer, and he's just writing... I mean, the Planet of the Incels episodes, come on, dude. And especially with the most recent episode, Kate Stewart should be, if not in prison for setting a monster on a person, she should definitely be questioned by her bosses, because that's made the government look just as dodgy as misinformation twatface has made them look. Like, they were streaming it to his social media. They've just riled his followers up into a frenzy. Anyway, the point is, politics is not being written by political left-leaning writers very well, but I trust that James Gunn can write politics with nuance. But also, the things that I think are not going to... The reason I think some things are not going to be shown in the trailer... the reason I think that some things that we're seeing in the trailer are not going to be fully shown or fully fleshed out in the film is because Warner Brothers is trying to make James Gunn play safe and loose with political narratives, because they don't want to piss off fans, because everyone's been pissing off fans of late. Studio-wise, with politics, whether behind the scenes like Snow White when they were originally going to cut all the prince's stuff, or just directly without writing it without nuance, and also writing characters to be left-wing characters but act like idiots and face no consequence like Kate Stewart. Anyway, this is really depressing, sorry. So, there's a lot of this that I don't think we're going to see from the trailer, but the trailers drew me in, and I'm interested to see how James is going to balance all of that, frankly. Yeah, this is my rather long-winded, very politically themed, even though it wasn't meant to be, and I'm sorry about that, video on the Superman trailer. I'm hyped, regardless of the criticisms I have, which is that I think this trailer is lying to us in some places. Are you hyped? Comment below and let me know. That's the end of the video, guys. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to come back and view my next video on the whole general thing of what the hell is going on with DC in general, because there's a lot we need to talk about with DC films at the moment. Anyway, that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you for sticking around this long. Sorry if it was a bit disjointed. Sorry I've not been uploading as much as I would have hoped. I will try and get back to that in the coming weeks, once I've gotten used to making sure all my subscriptions and tech works properly again. But if you've stuck around this long and heard me rant, thank you. Please comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share it wherever you will. Do what you will.